Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
At this stage of the discussion, to lend clarity to understanding how processes operate, it may be useful to spend some time understanding the nature of organizations. There are different types of organizations. There is the rational organization, there is the natural organization so called, there is the open organization, and each of them are quasi-technical words with a certain explicit meaning, and I will share with you the meaning. The rational, collective oriented to pursuit of relatively specific goals and exhibiting relatively highly formalized social structures. That is a rational organization. These are usually business organizations. The meaning will be clearer after you have heard what is a natural organization and what is an open organization, and after you have seen the example. The natural organization is collective, those participants which share a common interest in the survival of the system and who engage in collective activities informally structured to service this end, like for example, a religious organization or a charitable organization. Any charity will be far more loose than a business organization, because by definition charity has enough capital which it then wants to disperse to cause a social good. By definition, the business organization has to generate an activity to make money. Obviously, the processes will vary. In a religious organization, there is the feeling that you should do good. And if it is a proselytizing religion, you want to convince people. You want to convince that so and so was a prophet, and he was the last prophet. You want to convince so and so was a son of God, and God loved humanity so much that he sent his own son to atone for sins of the human beings. So when you want to convince, you don't order. The assumption changes. Nanak teaches modesty and talks of how he would rather be the skin should be converted into a pair of socks. The level of modesty he talks about. You get into an organization and the whole thing is a big charade. The boss comes, you stand up in attention. So a religious organization will obviously work in a different mode than a corporate entity. The processes will vary. And yet a third type is open organization, coalition of shifting interest groups that develop goals by negotiation. Political parties. You do this, then I will pass that. If you want me to pass this, you do that. Constant negotiation. And all in the name of public service. Then they want to throw somebody into the river. They want to put somebody on a mountain. Of course, I don't want to name details, but it was all over the press today. Why should somebody be thrown into a river? I can't understand. The river is polluted anyhow. You can't do that in a corporate entity. So, the coalition of shifting interest groups that develop goals by negotiation, the structure of the coalition and its activities and its outcomes are strongly influenced by environmental factors. For example, a standards organization. It all causes a continuum of workflow systems. Messages are the means of communication between the organizational employees and between the organization and its customers and suppliers. So, there is the concept of the internal customer and there is the concept of the external customer. Work items coordinate the receipts of the message and the organizational employee who carries out the work specified by the message. Business rules automate the decision processes and are used in assigning and executing the work item. But whether it is organization of the type A or organization of the type B or organization of the type C, they will all have workflows. That's the point. The work will originate somewhere, it will be processed somewhere, it will be consummated somewhere else. And remember, this session is devoted to understanding flows. Flow charts specify the organizational plan and how work flows through an organization. Messages in workflow need to deal with any type of message coming into the organization. Now, remember, all messages are not internal to the organization. Messages can come into the organization in many forms. The most obvious one is customer preference, but that's okay, there's nothing wrong with it, but it's not the most significant. The messages can come in through supplier conditions. Messages can come through takeover bids. Messages can come through sales of shares. Messages can come through a customer satisfaction index. And the list of workflows which can be generated by the messages coming in are almost endless. And if they are endless, one basic question arises. And the basic question is, how does the organization gear itself to receive the message? Once the message is received, how does it internalize it? Very often committees are used for it. For example, buying and selling of shares is always kept under observation. And then depending upon the trends there, internal messages are generated. It can be routed to the correct employee for processing, and this is very important. Ultimately, processes determine to whom the information goes and what does he do with that information. Can also be routed to a workflow. Annotations are added to the messages as it is processed. What do annotations do? Give the interpretation of the person who is processing the information. Annotate is commentary on the information. And the final decision making can be a summation of the different annotations through which that information has passed. And the important thing is to realize everyone doesn't see the information the same way. Managers perform workflow analysis in order to examine how work creates or adds value to the ongoing processes and business. This is correct, but a very simplistic version. It comes from manufacturing workflow. Each one is supposed to add value, and that is processing the workflow. What happens if there is a threat to the organization? What value do you add? What value do you add in assessing consumer preferences? The value will be added after you have interpreted that information. So, there is a whole cosmology of flows. Input, throughput, output sequence is the simplest of them all. And this is what you have to register as a manager. Workflow analysis looks at how work moves from the customer, that is the demand source, through the organization to the point at which the work leaves the organization as a product or service for the customer to meet the demand. I don't think there is much to be explained here. It speaks to it for itself, so we move on. Workflow analysis often reveals that some steps or jobs can be combined, simplified, or even eliminated. And this is where creative problem solving techniques come in. And through the use of a checklist of questions, you decide whether a work process should be abbreviated or extended. Now, what are the examples of abbreviation or extension? It is abbreviated when you say you put up the papers directly to the boss without going through intermediaries, and you create a 3-level sequence of processing. 1, the problem is identified and originates. 2, the problem is processed. 3, the problem has a decision. You have abbreviated the process. You can add to the process to make it more robust. You introduce internal audit. So, internal audit is like putting the train on a loop line. It won't get past till the internal audit has looked at it. So, you are extending the process to make the process more healthy. The message which you have to take from this is, you can do things to the processes in the interest of organizational effectiveness. Workflow analysis often reveals that some steps or jobs can be combined, simplified, or even eliminated. In other cases, it results in organization of work so that teams rather than individual workers are the source of value creation. I have spent enough time on this the last time when I was trying to explain to you that character of work has changed. Character of work has changed for many reasons, not the least of which is that it can't be any more a single function specialization. It can't be any more one person's glory, because everyone has to contribute to it, and we have covered all that. So, the question is, it would be an individual value addition or team value creation, and the answer is obvious. Business process re-engineering, BPR, is different from restructuring in that its focus is not just on eliminating layers of management, of which I have already given you an example, but rather a fundamental rethinking and radical redesign of business processes to achieve dramatic improvements in costs, quality, service, and speed. As matters stand today, management processes have moved even beyond business process re-engineering. And there is a growing feeling that business process re-engineering is very cumbersome. This was something fashionable in the late 90s. Of course, we continue talking of it because we never let anything die. This is the only place in the world where communities still survive on bows and arrows. They don't only survive on bows and arrows, they have enclaves where the forces of the state cannot enter. And if they try to enter, they are shot down. Every period of human history is alive here. Where else would you find a land like this? So when you teach management, you teach a lot of things of vintage value, and you also talk of business process re-engineering. There is nothing wrong with it. It is just that things have become far more sophisticated thereafter. It uses workflow analysis to identify a company's core processes. Then for a period, everything was being assessed in the framework of core. The core word became very fashionable. Core competency. Everyone was talking of core competency. Core process. They even talk of the core problem. Everything has a core. Now, it just abuses me. If life were to be so simple for people to identify what is the core competency, but then these are professional fashions which come and pass away. No tears are shed. Nobody knows when they come, how do they come. Nobody knows when they pass away into the oblivion and are taken over by new fashions. I told you everyone was looking at the bottom of the pyramid. Well, somebody will soon be looking through the prism. The purpose of understanding management theory and practice is to understand what actually causes a change. That's the business of it. If all this causes change, nothing like it. If it doesn't cause change, well, understand it because it's fashionable to understand it. Then the company organizing its human resources around these core processes to improve organizational performance. Heard that before. Through this analysis, jobs are identified that can be eliminated or recombined to improve company performance. Business process re-engineering. Steps in re-engineering core processes follow the following steps. These are the processes of processes, if you must understand. That's how important the word process is. This is the process of the processes. Identify the core processes, map the core processes in respect to the workflows, evaluate all tasks for the core processes, search for ways to eliminate necessary tasks or work, search for ways to eliminate delays, errors, misunderstandings, search for efficiencies and how work is shared and transferred amongst people and departments. So simple when you put it down in 6 breakup steps. So complicated when you start operating it. When in my late teenage, I was nominated for a Rotaract fellowship. So the done thing was to go to the district governor and seek advice and generally said, thank you so much for nominating me. Now that I will be going to another metropolitan center to be interviewed along with other Rotary nominations, what should I keep in mind? And then he would be in his chair rocking away. Those were days when it was still fashionable to smoke a cigar. In fact, if you are somebody who are supposed to have a pipe, now it's no longer in fashion. You're not supposed to smoke a cigar at all. But those were happy days. So he was smoking his cigar, once in a while looking at his pipe, trying to make up his mind whether he should pick up the pipe and will look more impressive or should continue with his cigar. I voted for the cigar. He was being very modern and he asked me, "Would you like a cigar, young man?" And I gave him an appropriate reply, "I don't smoke cigars before 8 o'clock in the evening." And he was very impressed. He said, "Oh, really? And what do you smoke before that?" I said, "Nothing, sir, nothing at all. I believe cigar is an index of relaxation and I don't relax till it." "Oh, really? How profound." So I said, "Sir, any advice?" He said, "Yes. In the interview, be polite but be firm." Then he said, "Stick to your own ground, but don't be mulish." I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "You don't have to agree for the sake of agreeing, but don't disagree for the sake of disagreeing." And it was a huge list like that. I said, "Excuse me, Sinha Sahab, just one question." He said, "Yes." I said, "How shall I be polite yet be firm?" He said, "You don't know?" I said, "No." He said, "You'll have to work it out." I said, "Then why are you telling me all this? I'll go to the interview and work it out." Because he was putting together all the opposite attributes and saying that's the way to walk through an interview. At which stage I decided, can I have a cup of coffee, sir? He said, "Yes," and entered his wife and she said in chaste Bengali, and I shall not speak Bengali because some of you may not understand it. She said, "Have you stopped bullying the child? Let him have his coffee." And the interview briefing came to a happy end. All that I am saying is, it is simple to break it up into 6 steps. When you actually start implementing it, you have to do it instinctively. You have to do it in a reflex manner. Actual decision-making process will never follow these 6 steps. Don't be under any illusion. And that's the message which I am trying to give you. Business process re-engineering requires proponents, allows the reinventing of a company by making it lean and mean. No longer fashionable words, but yes, they were at once upon a time. Critics, Hammer of Champy and Hammer usually says, "Don't automate, obliterate." Sounds absolutely grand. You try to do that today, then you bring down whole unions and political parties on your neck, and then starts that negotiation. Remember, you let this strike go, you get that quota. You don't let this strike go, we won't let that legislation. To many critics, re-engineering's greatest weakness is its lack of human side or its depersonalization. What are the work items? The work item specifies a task that needs to be carried out by an organizational worker. And the worker here doesn't mean a blue-collar worker. The word here really should be the personnel. The worker is identified by his or her role. Work item is identified by a message. The role is identified by a cue. The system initiates the work item and usually awaits until its completion. A workflow system's task is to coordinate with the outside work items. In other words, to create some sort of a structure to the process. And I am not putting together opposites. Even processes have to be structured. How do you do it? By identifying the role, by identifying a message, by putting it in a queue, initiating the work item and waiting to finish that before you start off with something else. And a workflow system's task is to coordinate with the outside workflow items. So the workflow is in a channel. What about the factors which are outside the workflow? For example, you are looking at an advertising campaign. What happens to the production process? So you coordinate even with that with which you are not interacting. What is the meaning of tasks here? Two key words in management. Remember what I said, tasks. Synchronizing multiple work items are usually modeled as a parallel split and a parallel joint. Timeouts. Workflow instances can wait forever for the completion of a work. And managing workflow instance memory, a workflow system is simultaneously processing a large number of workflows instances. This is where we start winding up the session. Work processes need not necessarily be single work processes. There may be parallel work processes. Not only parallel work processes, processes may be merging amongst themselves and again redistributing their flows. To understand processes, understand the river. And since it will be difficult for you to comprehend a river across 2000 kilometers, just go to a delta like the Sundarban Delta. The streams merge, they disperse, they merge again. There is this whole maze. And that's simpler to comprehend because you can look out into the flows even from a boat. And if you are lucky to get a helicopter or a flight and you look down, you see all the processes like flows clear there. You can see it clearly, but the flows are not clear. They have their logic of working, they have their logic of merging, they have their logic of demerging. In other words, the proposition which I want you to understand and internalize, like everything else, that is alive, that is vibrant. Workflows take on the character which their own tasks give to them. So you create flow diagrams, model internal and external entities and flow data, typical in documents. Between them, a simple technique for identifying the overall system, the major entities in the system. Workflows are allowed between internal entities and between internal and external entities. All workflows must be labeled. Many workflows are documented in either soft or paper form, and ultimately documentation of workflows is very important, and in course of time I will show you certain workflow diagrams. They all need not enter a closed loop. That is the point I want to make for now. Some of them flow and this is just dry up. No workflows are allowed between external entities. Here is an example. Delta Products Corporation is a major vendor of office supplies, furniture and equipment. Delta's sales representatives calls on customers to take orders. The sales rep write up the order and turn them into a sales order processing SOP clerk at the regional center. If the order items are in stock, the SOP clerk prepares a picking slip and packing list for each order. If any of the ordered items are out of stock, the SOP clerk completes an out of stock notice form which notes the number of customer requiring the items and forwards it to purchasing. A purchasing clerk then completes a purchase order which is mailed to a supplier. The SOP clerk notes back-oriented items on the customer's order and forwards a copy of annotated customer orders to accounts receivable. where an accounts receivable clerk prepares an invoice and sends it to the customer. The SOP clerk also forwards a picking slip and a packing list to the warehouse, where the stock price picker fills the order. Placing ordered items into boxes along with packing list, the boxed items and packing lists are held for delivery, usually via UPS. That is under postal certificate. Now you can draw flow diagrams of all this activity, just as you can draw an organization structure chart. And if an organization is a vibrant one, if an organization is a live one, then it works through drawing charts of how workflow is taking place. Because that's the only way you will know which way water is going and which stream needs to be blocked and which stream needs to be flowing but is clogging. And that's a managerial intervention. And it is that which makes for a successful organization. Here is the example of what happens. Just look at it yourself. The customer, warehouse, sales rep, SOP clerk, purchasing supplier. The whole case has been put down in a diagrammatic form. Please observe it carefully. I would recommend to those of you who are serious about understanding organization management, pick up any situation and try to put it in a flow diagram of work processes. Everything has a flow. There is no shortcut to learning management any more than there is a shortcut to learning anything. What you hear in these sessions is merely a lead and a framework to start doing your own exercises. And it's not that you do exercises only in accounts. You do exercises anywhere. You will not understand the subject matter till you practice it. It's one thing to have a theoretical appreciation. It is another thing to be able to do it clinically. Here is another diagram. Organizational level workflow diagram. The customer, the sales calls, the order, the invoice, the sales order processing department, purchase order, packing list, you pay. For those of you who had difficulty in understanding this, and you shouldn't have, because I had verbally narrated it, here is a simpler version. Skinned to its bones, designed to clarify. Because I have always derived satisfaction from the fact that once I explain a subject matter, anyone who bothers to keep awake will understand it. There is no point in my talking or explaining this till it is communicable and it communicates to the willing. And please note the caveat, willing. Obviously, I can't talk to the people who are not willing to listen. Here is a production release workflow, headquarters of the Department of Energy. This is a little more complicated. But then just when I have shown to you a simplistic diagram like this, I don't want you to walk away with a clear thought. What is there? So simple. Where was the need for a clash? I knew it already. Now you knew it already, now work this one out. In other words, I firmly believe that that which cannot be explained simply need not be explained at all. But it doesn't follow that what is explained simply is the only thing that needs to be understood at all. Please remember this statement. So for your edification, here is the proposal workflow processes from the headquarters of the Department of Energy, USA. Obviously, I have to cite US examples, otherwise you will not find it serious enough. I have a friend in a travel agency. He came to see me over the last weekend. He says, Doc, I'm going to start attending your organization management classes. I said, well, if you give me a little bit of a lead time, maybe I could get it organized for you. We have a provision of casual students. He said, you know what happened this Friday? I said, no. At 3 o'clock, a busybody of the city, whom everyone knows, who has access to all the power centers and, who's a great source of influence, called me. He says, I have to go to Singapore on Monday. So I said, very good, sir. I'll send you the ticket. He said, there is only one problem. The problem is I don't have a visa. So he said, what do you want me to do? Do something. That is typical. Do something. What do I do? The High Commission is closed. And if the High Commission doesn't even accept the passport, it goes to a VSF. No. What are you a travel agent for? That's a typical mentality. There is a way if I am influential. Give something, take something, call somebody, go somewhere, burn something, light something, say it's my paper. That's not the indication of a civil society. And any society which has a sizable number of such people who believe. I was talking to you about this flight from X to Z. We are an influential man, you simply hold up the flight. And everyone is happy to oblige, hoping that you will oblige in return, which you never will. But the hope is always there. Life doesn't go that way. An orderly society is the only society which will survive. So this shows how the Department of Energy headquarters functions, whether it is proposal stays in pending state or pending states waiting for available funds, or the headquarter administration assigns users to the program manager or assigns proposal review team, program manager review proposals, the headquarters project management review. The word PM there is not Prime Minister, it's project management review. A simple way of saying how systems should work, not influence. My passport going to Singapore 3 o'clock on Friday, something will happen. No, nothing will happen. It happens only. I haven't said that. It happens many other places. Let's not berate ourselves. All that I feel bad about is it should not be happening here. Now you see how the sentence is reconstructed. That's a constructive approach to developing things. You recognize a flaw, you see how it's unfit for you, you put in the corrective processes, and that's how development takes place. Then there is the communication and information flow. Communication can be understood as passing of information in humans, animals, computers, and any other cognitive entity. In a broader sense, communication can refer to almost any type of movement, be it matter, energy, force, or some effect. Space and time might be the only things that can't themselves be communicated. I think that's a profound statement. Everything can be communicated. Emotions, funds, results, two things can't be communicated: space and time. And therefore, existence is space and time. You exist in space and you melt into time. Information flow in different forms of organizations based on their organization structure. A bureaucratic organization has strictly hierarchical information flows. Restricted in nature, boundaryless or flatter organizations would have lateral information sharing with a common pool of information. Now, I am going to close the session with merging of structures and processes, how there is an iterative process and one affects the other. Communication structures can be upwards, downwards, lateral, networking, grapevine. Failure of communication and information flows can cause the semantic block, the block which words cause, intentional block. There can be organizational blocks. There can be a status block, faulty expressions and translations, faulty listening. Communication can falter at many levels. Information sharing in an empowered organization, the possession of a knowledge and withholding it from others, is a way to maintain a system of domination. On the other hand, in an empowering organization, processes are in place that ensure a widespread sharing of information. Information moves from closely guarded at the top to openly shared throughout the organization, and suggests that to be empowered, employees need two kinds of information: information about the organization's mission and goals, and information about their performance. There are scales of information sharing in organizations, and I'll pause here so that you can read through it. And of course, like everything else, it needs an audit. In order to know the information needs at various levels, organizations have started doing information audits. This also ascertains the information flow networks and gaps, methodologies to overcome such problems, so that proper information flows exist within the organization. It is a process that tends to identify an organization's information needs, to create a realistic portrait of the current situation, to optimize communication levels, market the information, communication services, enhance the profile of information. Then there is such a thing as strategic information need. This identifies executive strategic information needs to create a realistic portrait of current situation, to develop a gap analysis. This is strategic information needs continuous cycle. Again a flow. My way of conveying to you that if you understand what you are talking about, you can always put it in a flow. And with that, we stop. Hopefully, we will be building upon it in the coming sessions, and you will see how the interaction between structure and processes leads to greater organizational effectiveness.